Hello everyone, welcome back to Pabbly. In this video, we're going to learn how to create GoToWebinar meeting registrant from Notion item. So I'm a personality development coach, and using Notion, I have created a table in which I'm creating a record of all my participants who are now interested in the webinar and enrolled into it. And using GoToWebinar, I manage all the webinars that I'm hosting. Here what I want is that as soon as I'm going to create a new database item in my Notion, I'm going to add the participants details in my Notion. I want to create that participant as a registrant in my GoToWebinar account in the webinar that I've created. I want to enroll that registrant. Now doing this manually is very time consuming. So what I've done is I've simply automated this entire process with the help of Pabbly Connect, which is an amazing automation and integration software. And here in this automation, I'm going to build a connection between Notion and GoToWebinar with the help of it. So if you also want to learn about this amazing automation process step by step, for that let me take you to my screen. In this video, we're going to learn how to create GoToWebinar meeting registrant from Notion item. So as a personality development coach, I use Notion to organize and track clients' information. And I also use GoToWebinar to host training sessions, workshops, and group discussions, enabling me to reach a wider audience. To make my workflow more efficient, I've set up an automation where every time a new client details is added in my Notion database as an item, they are automatically been registered to my webinar that I've created in my GoToWebinar account. This ensures my clients are seamlessly enrolled in the right webinars, allowing me to focus on delivering value while saving time and avoiding manual efforts. And I'm going to create this amazing automation between Notion and GoToWebinar with the help of Pabbly Connect. So on the screen, you can see the website of Pabbly Connect, that is pabbly.com/connect. After browsing this website, we need to sign into our Pabbly Connect account. But if you're a new user, you can sign up for free and get 100 free tasks every month. So as I'm an existing user, I'm going to sign into my Pabbly Connect account. After signing in, you can see the All Pabbly Apps window in front of you, in which you can see all the application that Pabbly provides. From which we are going to select Pabbly Connect by clicking on this Access Now button right here. Then Pabbly Connect's dashboard is going to appear in front of you. In order to start an automation process in Pabbly Connect, we need to create a workflow. For that, click on this top right corner button right here that says Create Workflow. A dialog box is then going to appear in front of you, which is asking for the workflow name and for us to select a folder. So for the name of my workflow over here, I'm going to give it as Create GoToWebinar Meeting Registrant from Notion item. So this is the name that I want to give to my workflow. After that, it is asking for us to select a folder. So on the left side of my screen, you can see I have created multiple folders in my Pabbly Connect account, from which I'm going to select a specific folder in which I want to save this workflow in. For that, click on this drop down. These are the folders from which I'm going to select GoToWebinar as a folder I want to save this workflow in. After giving the name to the workflow and selecting the folder, I'm going to click on this Create button in order to create a workflow. A workflow is created in the name of Create GoToWebinar Meeting Registrant from Notion item, and you can see there are two windows in front of you. One says Trigger, other says Action. So what is Trigger and Action? Trigger and action are the two most important steps of our automation process because our process depends on these two concepts. Over here, trigger says when this happens and action says do this. That means what is action? Action is a response towards our trigger. In an automation process, there can be only one trigger step but multiple action steps. We are going to set up our trigger step first. And for the trigger application over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it as Notion. As in my Notion account, I have created a table in which I'm entering my clients' details who have registered themselves for the webinar that I'm hosting. I want that as soon as I'm going to add the details of a client in my Notion database as an item, automatically the trigger should capture the response of that. And that is why for my trigger application, I've selected it as Notion. And for the trigger event, I'm going to select it as new database item. Okay. After selecting the trigger application and the event, I'm going to click on this connect button right here. A window is going to appear in front of you on which click on add new connection, or else you can select the existing connection that you have. After that, click on connect with Notion button right here. As I'm going to do that, over here it is asking for us to first select the page that we want to connect. So I've created a page over here in the name of, I'm going to search for it, Registrants details. Okay, so I'm going to add this page over here, and after adding the page, what I'm simply going to do is I'm going to scroll down over here and click on this Access Now button. As this is saved present, my data is perfectly saved with Pabbly Connect. So I'm going to click on this Access Now button right here. As I've done that, you can see successfully authorized Notion to Pabbly Connect. After authorizing over here, it is asking for it to select the database ID. So I've created a database over here in the name of registrant details. So I'm going to select the ID over here from the drop down. After selecting the database over here, it is saying save and send test request button. So as we're going to click on this button, the last database item that we have created in this table that has been added is going to be captured in the response right here. So before clicking on this button, I'm going to go back to my Notion account and I'm going to add the details of a new participant who is interested in my webinar that I'm hosting. Okay, so I'm going to enter the details right here. First name, I'm going to write it as test. For the last name over here, I'm going to write it as user1. For the email over here, I'm going to write it as testuser1@pabblytudes.com. Next, it is asking for the phone number. So for the phone number over here, I'm going to write in a dummy mobile number. For the address over here, I'm going to write it as 101 New City. Okay, and then for the pin code over here, I'm going to write in a dummy pin code right here. For the city over here, I'm going to write it as Bhopal. Okay, if I'm going to scroll down, next it is asking for the state. So for the state over here, I'm going to write it as Madhya Pradesh, and for the country over here, I'm going to write it as India. Okay, after filling in all the required details, what I'm going to do is, as now the database item is created, I'm going to go back to my workflow and click on this save and send test request button right here. And as I'm going to do that, if I'm going to tally the response, you can see the response of the database has been created, has been captured over here. The state over here comes as Madhya Pradesh. If I'm going to further scroll down, for the postal code, this is the postal code you can see right over here. If I'm going to scroll down over here, you can see for the phone number, this is the mobile number. If I'm going to scroll down, last name comes as user1. First name over here comes as test, you can see right over here. If I'm going to further scroll down, email comes as testuser1@pabblytudes.com. Country as India, you can see right here. If I'm going to scroll down, city comes over here as Bhopal. I'm going to further scroll down, address as 101 New City with all the other details. As the response of the Notion database item has been captured over here in our trigger, this means that Notion has now been successfully connected to Pabbly Connect and our trigger setup is done. Now, if you're going to add another item in your Notion database and you don't capture the response immediately after adding the database item, then do not worry because Notion is a polling based application. As you can see over here, it says 1 hour. This is the trigger time. That is the polling duration. That means in every 1 hour, whenever you're going to add the new data in your Notion database, Notion is going to send that new data to Pabbly Connect in this polling duration, that is 1 hour right here. And if you want to make any changes in this polling time right over here, click on these 3 dots and go to set trigger time option right here. A window is going to appear in front of you. And if you're going to click on this drop down over here, you can see the minimum trigger time comes over here as 10 minutes to the maximum being 24 hours. You can see right here, okay? 24 hours. So you can select the polling time according to requirement. I want it as 10 minutes. So I'm going to select the trigger time over here as 10 minutes and save the changes. You can see the trigger time has been changed. So as now Notion is connected to Pabbly Connect, we need to set up our action step. My objective is that now as I've entered the data of the registrant details in this Notion database as an item, I want to create the same participant as a registrant in the webinar that I'm hosting using GoToWebinar. Now for that, we're going to set up our action step. And for the action application over here, I'm going to select it as GoToWebinar. And for the action event, I'm going to select as create registrant. Then I'm going to click on this connect button. A window is going to appear in front of you. Always click on add new connection or else you can select the existing connection that you have. After that, over here it is asking for the from time and the to time of the webinar that we are hosting. And we have to enter both of the time in a UTC time zone format and the given format right over here. So if I'm going to go back to the webinar that I'm hosting, it is for 1st Feb 2025 from the time being 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Indian Standard Time. This is the time zone, okay? So over here, I want to enter the from time and the to time of this webinar right here. And as it is asking for the UTC time zone format, so I'm going to open a new tab. And over here, I'm going to search for IST to UTC. Okay, this is the IST to UTC converter. You can select any converter according to your requirement. After that, over here, it is asking for the IST time. As my webinar starts from 10 a.m. So I'm going to select the time over here as 10 a.m. right here. I'm going to select as 00 and AM. Okay, I'm going to click on this OK. IST 10 a.m. is equal to 4:30 a.m. in a UTC time zone format. So now we're going to enter the details. This is the date time format that we have to enter. I'm going to copy it from here, paste it on this field. We're going to make changes. For the 2025, February is 02 and the date is 01. Okay, and the time over here comes as 04, that is 4:30 right here. Okay, so this is the date and time. I'm going to copy it from here and paste it to the to time field right here. Now for the to time, the date is correct, but the time over here is going to be 11 a.m. We have to convert it in a UTC time zone format. So I'm going to select it as 11 a.m. which is equal to 5:30 a.m. in a UTC time zone format. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the changes over here in 5:30 a.m. After doing that, over here I'm going to click on this connect with GoToWebinar button right here. As I've done that, you can see we successfully authorized GoToWebinar to Pabbly Connect. After connecting, it is asking for us to select a webinar. So I've created a webinar over here in the name of Unlock Your Potential Strategies for Personal and Professional Growth. And I want to create registrants in this webinar right here. So what I'm going to do is, for the webinar, I'm going to select the webinar right here from the drop down. After that, over here it is asking for all these details with the help of which we are going to create registrants in our GoToWebinar account. So for the data of these fields, what we are going to do is we are going to map the data. Mapping means inserting data from the previous step. So we're going to insert the data from the previous step of this workflow. And how mapping works is that as soon as I'm going to click on this field, you can see this was a previous step. As I'm going to click on it, you can see this is the same response that was captured in our previous step. Firstly, it is asking for the first name. So for the first name over here, I'm going to search for the first name that I've received, that is right here. So I'm going to select the data of the first name of my registrant from my previous response as I want to create the same registrant in my GoToWebinar account. So as I've selected the data from my previous response, this means the data is mapped. And as the data is mapped, what happens is the data has now become dynamic. That means now whenever a new response is going to be captured in our previous step, automatically the new data is going to be updated in place of this mapped data. Similarly, for the last name, what I'm going to do is I'm going to map the data of the last name that I've received right here. So this is the data. I'm going to map the data right here. For the email over here, I'm going to map the data of the email that I've received right here. After that, over here, it is asking for the address. So I'm going to search for the address right here and I'm going to map the data right here. Okay. So this is the data. I'm going to map it. For the city over here, I'm going to map the data of the city that I've received right here. If I'm going to further scroll down, for the state over here, I'm going to search for state. And I'm going to map the data of the state that I've received right here. For the zip code, I'm going to map the data of the zip code that I've received. So this is the data, I'm going to map it. For the country over here, I'm going to map the data of the country that I've received, that is India. I'm going to map the data right here. And for the phone number, we're going to map the data of the phone number that we have received, okay? As now we've received the response, as now we've entered all the required details, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this Save and Send Test Request button right here. As I've done that, we have received a response, which is a positive response as we have received the registrant key. So now I'm going to open my webinar. This is my webinar. I'm going to refresh this page from here. As I've refreshed the page over here, if I'm going to scroll down, it says registration. I'm going to click on registration. I'm going to scroll down. It says total registrants. I'm going to click on this number right here. And as I'm going to do that, you can see a new registrant has been created in my webinar that I'm hosting with the help of GoToWebinar with the first name as test, last name as user1. Over here, email is testuser1@pabblytudes.com. The date and the time zones, the address as 101 city. Bhopal is the city, state is Madhya Pradesh, this is the postal code, country as India, and this is the mobile number. So as the registrant has now been successfully created in my GoToWebinar account from the Notion database item, this means that we successfully created an automation between Notion and GoToWebinar with the help of Pabbly Connect. So now to sum up till now what we have done, I'm a personality development coach and using Notion, I create the record of all my registrants who are interested in the recent webinar that I'm hosting. And using GoToWebinar, I manage all my webinars. Over here for my trigger, I've selected it as Notion, new database item, as whenever a new database item is going to be created in my Notion with the registrant's details, automatically over here the trigger is going to capture the response of that. And using the response of the participant who is participating in my webinar, automatically they're going to be created as a registrant in my GoToWebinar account using this action step, in which from action application I've selected it as GoToWebinar and action event as create registrant. And with Pabbly Connect, I built the connection between these two applications. So this was it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Not just with these applications, you can create automation between multiple other applications with the help of Pabbly Connect. If you have any questions, you can contact us on support@pabbly.com. If you have any queries, you can check the queries on forum.pabbly.com. And if you have any pricing related issues, then you can check out this link. If you like this video, please do subscribe to our channel, hit on the like button, comment on if you have any questions or doubts, and please share this video.